There's a fondue of Easter eggs. There's a lot of chocolate Easter eggs. Everything in Wicked is intentional and purposeful.
Today is the highly anticipated release of Wicked for Good. I was blessed to be able to see the movie at the beginning of the week before it came out with a pre screening, and oh my gosh, it did not disappoint. I went into the movie with a completely blind perspective. I didn't read the book, I've never seen the play, so I had no idea what was going on. I'm gonna be honest, I was very confused. All of that confusion was absolutely cleared up in the second movie. It was an incredible production, and as somebody who grew up in theater and chorus, I know what it takes to put on any type of production, but something of that caliber is just amazing. From the set design to the costumes to the directing, and let's not forget the amazing cast. It was truly something special, and there's a reason why fans all over are raving about this movie. And if you're like me and you went into this completely blind and have no idea what's happening in the second movie, I really suggest that you shut this off because there's going to be so many spoilers in this video. Just come back to it when you're done watching because after you see the second film, you're going to understand that there were a lot of Easter eggs and foreshadowing telling us what was going to happen in the next film. So there are so many spoilers. I will not be mad if you shut this off and come back. Just make sure you come back because there are going to be so many things that we cover that not everybody even realized were in the movie. I pay attention to little details and I saw so many things that just kind of like didn't seem like anything when I first watched it. But then when I saw the second movie, then rewatched the first movie and then saw the second movie again, I saw that these little details are there for a reason. So we're just going to get into some of the foreshadowing and Easter eggs that I personally noticed in Wicked Part 1. This is your last chance to shut the video off to avoid any spoilers, and I promise you, you do not want to have this movie spoiled. Going into it, not knowing what to expect was probably the best thing I've ever experienced. So we're just going to jump right into it. When you have the opening scene in the first movie and you see the children running in the tulips fields, we already know going into this that the Wicked Witch of the West, Elphaba, is dead. The movie starts off with her death. But as you notice, when the children are running through the tulip field, the song changes just slightly. The melody shifts to the beginning of Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead from The Wizard of Oz. Now, this is not a foreshadowing, it's just a slight little nudge to The Wizard of Oz and where this story was kind of inspired from. As we know, Elphaba's skin is green because of an elixir that her mom was drinking when she was having an affair. But you may not realize it because it happens so quickly in the way that the camera is angled and shot. That little green bottle and the mystery man that her mom invites in tells us a lot more than you may think. If you listen to the voice, right before he starts singing, the man makes this slight little sound. A sound that, if you have an ear for it, you'll be able to hear where that voice came from later on within the movie. Then, if you pay attention to his voice when he's singing and the notes that he hits and how he hits them, we will definitely be hearing that person singing later on in the movie. And it kind of lets us know from the beginning who Elphaba's father really is without actually telling us.
Have another drink, my dark-eyed beauty. I've got one more night left here in town.
Now, they obviously intentionally hid his face for a reason, but if you slow this down, you'll be able to see some features, especially a side profile, looks a little familiar. As you can see, Elphaba's mom's shoes are on the floor. These shoes will later be given to Nessa Rose. But these shoes are very, very specifically designed for a reason. No, they do not emulate the ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz, which they shouldn't. The book has silver shoes. The Wizard of Oz only did the shoes ruby red, just so that they could display the Technicolor because that was very new at that time. And also they're trademarked, so I don't think they were even able to put them in the movie if they wanted to. But the costume department of this movie made these intricate designs in the shoes for a reason. That reason we're going to find out in a little bit. From the very beginning of the movie, we see that Elphaba has this unspoken connection and bond with the wizard. And people may think, like, oh, well, she's green and the Emerald City's green, so she likes the wizard because of that. Or that she's hoping one day he will de-greenify her. But there is a very big clue in this scene where Elphaba is reading the pop up book to Nessa Rose, and she's explaining that the wizard's favorite color is emerald, despite it being green.
Made of emeralds. Because he loves emeralds, even though they're green.
Well, what else do we know is green other than the Land of Oz? We know the bottle's green, and we know Elphaba is green. Let's do some math and put two and two together. Because even though they don't outright say it, this scene right here, I felt personally was really crucial because it showed us that there was a connection between Elphaba and the wizard right from the beginning. Now we're gonna go to Shiz, where Glinda is meeting Bach for the first time. Bach's movements and mannerisms in this scene is very crucial to his foreshadowing. The way that Bach is tilting and has to put his hand over his heart to readjust himself quite literally mimics the movements of the Tin Man, which we later find out that's who Bach gets turned into.
What have you done to me?
So, right from the beginning, when we see Bach's character, he is quite literally telling us, hey, this is what's happening. This is who I'm going to be turned into. They obviously do not outright say it, but these teeny tiny little Easter eggs so easily will be overlooked, especially, like I said, someone like me who had no idea what was going on. But once you see it and you connect these two little dots and put two and two together, it is so remarkable how they were able to like sneak these little Easter eggs in there without a lot of people noticing them right away.
Father.
Oh, Nessa Rose. My sweet, sweet Nessa Rose. As we see in Wicked Part 1, and also what's pictured in the trailers for Wicked for Good, Nessa Rose is always seen wearing striped socks. Who else wears striped socks? A witch that had a very large house dropped on her. Then we see in a very, very quick clip in the trailer, when Nessa Rose is levitating, she is wearing those striped socks, but those silver shoes are turning red from Elphaba's magic. So if you have never seen the movie, you've never seen the play, and you had no idea what was going on, these little details are very easily overlooked. Until the governor gave Nessa Rose the shoes, I noticed something very, very important in this scene. Earlier, when I said to look at the design and the intricacy of the shoes, they're this way for a reason. So the heel of the shoe actually mimics a twister in a tornado, which foreshadows how she dies later on in part 2. And then also you see the swirls in the shoes that are representing the storm that unfortunately takes Nessa Rose's life when she becomes the Wicked Witch of the East. Now, when the governor opens the box, we see that they are her mother's shoes, but they're not the regular trademark ruby slippers that we all know from The Wizard of Oz. But you do know that these shoes represent the ruby slippers, especially if you read the book, because in the book they're silver. But another hint that we see is on the inside of the box, the entire inside of the box is adorned with ruby red crystals, which is another hint and, in my opinion, a slight little like hat tilt to the ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz. Now, this is not foreshadowing, it's just again another little hat tilt to The Wizard of Oz. When the teacher is talking to Nessa Rose and Elphaba, she mentions that it is just a slight gulch. Gulch is the name of Miss Elvira Gulch, the original Wicked Witch of the West.
Not a fret, just a slight gulch.
Elmira Gulch. Just because you own half the county doesn't mean you have the power to run the rest of us.
Now that it's established that Elphaba will be a part of Shiz, we move on to the song The Wizard and I. I love this song and it has so many little Easter eggs and just nudges to The Wizard of Oz, and I think it's so beautiful. Even somebody who doesn't know what's going to happen in the second part, when I first watched part 1, I was listening to the words of the song and I'm just like, those are put there for a reason, and it's very, very obvious, but I love it. I definitely don't think this was like a foreshadowing, but a part of me was very curious as to why there was this Mount Rushmore type style sculpture of the wizard just like tucked away in this little grotto, like it wasn't even out in public. I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say here, that they were trying to foreshadow or even do like a little nudge, but I felt something, so I'm just going to put that there just in case. But something that really stood out to me was when Elphaba was saying that all of Oz is going to celebrate her one day. And I thought that was such a heartbreaking line because, like, she was right, but not in the way that she thought that they were going to celebrate her, which is really heartbreaking.
Someday there'll be a celebration throughout Oz. It's all to do with me.
Then we get to another little clue in the song, which I'm going to say it's foreshadowing, but not really, because when we opened up Wicked Part 1, you know that she melted. So when she says the line that she's so happy she could melt,
Be so happy I could melt.
that also made me kind of sad because I'm like, girl, you're gonna melt soon. Now, this next one is definitely a little hat tilt to the Wizard of Oz. When Elphaba is in the field, you see her running and jumping what looks like over the rainbow. And when she does this, birds start flying. But it's not just any birds, it is quite literally bluebirds. So, somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds do fly.
Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly.
Now, when we get to the song What Is This Feeling, there's so much stuff going on in this musical number, but there's one particular little scene that really stood out to me. If you've seen the Wicked for Good trailer, you do see that there's a part that shows Elphaba and Galinda just battling it out, and they look really angry. So it's gonna make a viewer who doesn't know what's going on think that like they are brawling for real. But no, that's not what's happening here. In the song What Is This Feeling, you see them at school practicing fighting. Before they start practicing fighting, they bow to each other, which shows you that this is not a confrontational thing. This is just practice. It is not a fight that's rooted in anger or disagreements. They're literally just at school practicing. And they do the exact movements that they do in the trailer of Wicked for Good. So that right there just tells me this is not a confrontational fight. Like, it's just like girls, just like fighting and bickering. And when you see Wicked for Good, you see that that's the case, that when they start to brawl on the yellow brick road, it's just friendly fun. So this is actually not foreshadowing. This is just another cute little hat tilt to the Wizard of Oz. In the scene where we see Madame Morrible giving a private lesson to Elphaba, there's this one part where Elphaba's hand is casting a shadow, and it is like mimicking one of the posters for the Wizard of Oz, where we see Elvira Gulch, the Wicked Witch of the West, make this pose with her hands. And it leaves this beautiful, like spooky shadow in the background. So this scene was just a little hat tilt to that. Now, another foreshadowing that we see is when Elphaba and Fiyero first meet in the woods. When she walks away, she tells Fiyero to get stuffed,
Get stuffed.
Wow.
which we see later on has some very intense relevancy. But also, there's a little hat tilt in this scene. You can't really see it because it's a really dark scene. There's not that much color or light. They're deep in the woods. But you notice later on that Fiyero's horse is a different color. He's a horse of a different color, which is another little hat tilt to the Wizard of Oz.
He's the horse of a different color you've had tell about.
Now, since we're on Fiyero, we're going to talk about his Dancing Through Life number, which tells us so much about what is going to happen to him. It is actually crazy. See, the book that he's holding is called Forbidden Corn. And something that we all already know is scarecrows are put in fields to keep animals and predators just away from corn, making it forbidden to them. And we see Fiyero dancing in a really familiar way. His dance movements and his motions mimic those of the scarecrow, which we know he's going to turn into in part 2. Now, if that wasn't enough, there's more. When he says life is painless for the brainless,
Life's more painless for the brainless.
who do we know doesn't have a brain? That's another hint of his fate that's going to come in part 2. But that's not all. When Fiyero is dancing in these wheels, he is quite literally surrounded by images of corn. There's images of corn carved into the wood that's around him. And I think that it's so crazy because there was all these little hints in just this one song alone that not everybody caught the first time. I did not catch that at all. I mean, I had no idea what was going to happen, but even still, those were so many clues and so many little hints of what's going to happen to him. It was actually surprising. In a good way. Like, when he got turned, I was like, oh wow, Like, that all just makes so much sense. And then while we're in this scene, we see that Glinda is talking to Bach, and Bach gives her one of his handkerchiefs, and he says she should keep it because he has a lot, because he cries a lot.
Keep it. I've got many. I cry a lot.
Who else cries a lot in The Wizard of Oz? Oh, the Tin Man. As we saw at the beginning when they first came to Shiz, Bach's movements were very, very similar to that of the Tin Man, which we find out in part 2 he was turned into to save his life. Now, this next point I'm going to make is also foreshadowing, but I feel like if you want to split hairs. So, in this scene, you see that Glinda gives him his handkerchief and places it right over his heart. His heart is what he loses when he gets turned into the Tin Man. And people say that he gets turned into the Tin Man because of her, because he was going to confess his love to her. And then Nessa Rose wanted to place a spell on his heart. She's not a real witch, so she couldn't do it properly. And then Elphaba had to save his life, so it resulted in him being turned into the Tin Man. Now we are at the song Popular. We have absolutely no foreshadowing in the song Popular, but we do have a nice little hat tilt to The Wizard of Oz. This one I feel like was really obvious to the viewers. You see Glinda telling Elphaba that she's going to help her pick what shoes to wear. She goes in her trunk and she grabs ruby slippers. Now, these are not the trademark ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz. They're very similar. But something she does to these slippers just lets you know, if you had any doubt, this is definitely a little hat tilt to The Wizard of Oz. She takes the slippers and clicks the heels 3 times. Now, when we see everybody in class and they bring in this baby cub, you see that the baby cub in the cage is very terrified. He's scared. And later on, we learn that this baby cub actually turns into the Cowardly Lion. We do understand why he blames Elphaba for being this way, although it is not properly placing the blame. She did nothing wrong. However, you can understand he was a baby, he didn't understand what was going on, and it unfortunately turned him into the Cowardly Lion. And during this scene, we see that Elphaba, rightfully so, gets outraged of what's happening and accidentally casts this poppy spell. And you notice that the poppy spell affects everyone in the classroom except 2 people, Elphaba and Fiyero. In The Wizard of Oz, there's also a specific character that is not affected by the poppy spell that was set by the Wicked Witch of the West, which was the Scarecrow, which is another foreshadowing of what was going to happen to Fiyero. Now, also, I personally believe that it didn't affect him because Elphaba didn't really have control over her magic at that time, and we all know from the beginning they had feelings for each other. So I think maybe her love for him also kind of like shielded him, but that's just my opinion. Not a foreshadowing, just another little hat tilt to where this all was inspired by. When we see Fiyero and Elphaba rescuing the baby lion cub, we see that the lion cub is placed in a basket on her bike while she's pedaling away, which is very familiar when you've seen The Wizard of Oz with the Wicked Witch of the West putting Toto in her basket on the back of her bike. We are back at Shiz, and Elphaba is receiving an invitation for her exclusively from the wizard. And you start to notice that there's a storm that's going to come in. Madame Morrible says not to worry because weather is her specialty. She puts an umbrella over Elphaba and says,
Mustn't let you get wet.
which we all know is because water is Elphaba's weakness. Now, this is another hair-splitting foreshadowing that I noticed, and it honestly was accidental. So when Madame Morrible is changing the weather to make sure that the rain doesn't get Elphaba wet, she's moving the clouds around, and for a split second, you see that the cloud behind Elphaba actually turns into the shape of a witch's hat, which is a subtle way of telling us that Madame Morrible is completely responsible for the narrative that's painted towards Elphaba, not only in part 1, but also as we see in part 2. Now the girls have arrived to the Emerald City, where there's actually a play happening when they arrive, and we are met with 2 very familiar faces. The original actresses that play Glinda the Good Witch and Elphaba on the Broadway play Wicked, Kristen and Adina, actually join us in this movie as 2 storytellers that are telling what happened with the wise ones that came before them. So when Kristen and Adina's characters are telling the story about the wise ones, something happens. I noticed that Kristen's wand went out, meaning she had no magic, and she had to tap on Adina's wand in order to get her magic back. Now, as we know, Kristen played Glinda the Good Witch, and Adina played the Wicked Witch of the West, Elphaba. which we also know is the only one who has real power. Glinda the Good Witch doesn't have magic whatsoever. I don't know exactly what they were trying to portray, but I just felt like that was a very intentional thing that happened in the play, and it immediately caught my attention. Now, Glinda and Elphaba have met the wizard, and the wizard does a lot of things that at first kind of like made me raise an eyebrow. I don't know how to do that, sorry. But when I saw the second movie, I was like, oh, now I know why that happened. So when Elphaba first meets the wizard, he goes up to her and like pulls a coin behind her ear. To me, that's a really like parental type of trick to do to a child. And I just thought that was very, very intentional. Now, when the wizard is showing Elphaba and Galinda his little model of Emerald City, he begins by telling them that he's always wanted to be a father.
Always longed to be a father.
Then, when he starts singing A Sentimental Man, you hear him saying some other things that are some major clues. He starts singing and says a line where he sees everyone as if they're his son or his daughter. Now, when he says son, he looks to Glinda, and then when he says or daughter, he turns and looks directly at Elphaba, and she has this beautiful, like, innocent smile come across her face.
Son or daughter.
And then he goes on to saying that helping her makes him feel parental.
Helping you with your assent allows me to feel so parental.
And that is one of the very last Easter eggs that we see in the movie, which is huge because at the end of Wicked Part 2, we find out who Elphaba's birth father really is, the wizard. And then the movie ends with some amazing action-packed scenes and, of course, defying gravity. And then we were all left to wait for Wicked Part 2. But thankfully, you don't have to wait anymore because Wicked Part 2 comes out tomorrow on November 21st. And I really, really suggest that you go and see this movie. If you haven't seen the play, it does not matter. This movie is incredible. Go watch part 1. It is streaming on Prime right now. And then get your butts to the theater so you can see Wicked for good.